He is, of course, one of Australia's highest-profile psychologists. He is the go-to man right across the media, in particular for advising and giving his opinion on the younger generation. He's the author of 7 books, including the bestseller and my favourite title, Princess Bitchface Syndrome, How to Handle Teenage Girls. Can some of you understand that? I think I've been there. He's also just released his latest book, When to Worry. The title should give you a little bit of an insight into his forte. Right now, he's here to speak to you about when to take control. Would you please welcome Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg? I recognise you. Do I recognise you? Yes.
No one should be that talented, truly, just extraordinary. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Saxtons, for giving me this opportunity. I have to tell you that there was a man, an executive, who came home recently from the office. He'd stopped off at the pub on the way, and when he walked through his front door, he saw a young man, his son, sitting on the couch with his feet up, watching The Simpsons. And instead of saying to his son, "G'day, son, how was your day?" something about his son irritated him. Probably had had a few too many drinks, and he said 5 words guaranteed to start a fight. "Have you done your homework?" The young man tactfully ignored him and just kept on watching The Simpsons. This irritated this executive, who then walked round in front of his son and asked him a question from the University of the Bleeding Obvious. "Are you deaf?" Now, that was a stupid question because he hadn't bought him a cochlear implant lately. The son basically just grunted. That infuriated the man even more, so he walked over to the TV set and turned it off. This set the young man off, and he exploded with rage. He stormed out of the room, yelled to no one in particular, "I'm going to a house where there are normal people," and he slammed the door on his way out, saying to his father that he was going to his best friend's place. The father stands there with the couch and wonders what went wrong. He then goes into the kitchen where his lovely wife is preparing the evening meal, a Chateaubriand with Béarnaise sauce, and he said, "Did you hear that?" And the wife, probably a little unhelpfully, said, "Everybody heard that." And he then says to his wife, "Well, he can't talk to me like that." And the wife says, equally unhelpfully, "Well, he just did." And this is the next and saddest thing. He then got even more angry, and he said, "Well, he can't do that. I'm going to remonstrate with him." And he leapt in his car to try and intercept his son. Unfortunately for him, there was a police car parked on the side of the road, and he was going a little bit too fast. He got pulled over and lost his licence for being over the limit. A modern-day Aesop's fable. What did that bloke do wrong? Well, where do I start? He didn't have a developmental perspective, and he's not alone, because if you look at the literature, half of the males and females who have teenagers say that they lack confidence in their parenting. But the really weird thing is 80% are too embarrassed to actually ask for help, which is kind of sad. The problem is, of course, that when they're born, you don't get one of these. I remember I was at the catcher's end, a lot of stuff came out, the kid came out, but there was no manual. A mate of mine who passed away last year, John Cheetham, once said, "There is no such thing as a perfect parent," and indeed there is no such thing. In fact, if you ask either of my 2 sons, they would agree. All families have difficulties from time to time, and it doesn't matter how much money you've got, doesn't matter how wealthy you are, just you are going to have problems because you live in a group of people, it's close, and they get under your skin. The problem with this bloke is that he didn't get the classic adolescent paradox. You see, adolescence is all about telling your parents, "I can stand on my own 2 feet," but in the next nanosecond they're asking where my socks are. And that's your classic adolescent dilemma. They want to separate, but they still need your guidance. So in order to get through this, in order to actually survive, you have to put this in perspective. If you have children, be grateful that you don't have a 13-year-old who's basically making babies. Be grateful that you don't have Corey. Be grateful that you don't have a daughter who basically gets 52 stars tattooed on her face for the rest of her life and then lies about it to the media. In fact, you need to be grateful that this is not your son, because imagine introducing him at a party. Many years ago, I was writing a column for Family Circle, and I remember the number of parents used to write to me in desperation. My favourite was a woman who had a daughter called Sophie, and she said to me, "Dear Dr. Michael, she said, all my children drink at the fountain of knowledge, but Sophie only gargles." And I like that. Other favourite sayings that I got were this one: "At times I think my son is depriving a village somewhere of an idiot." Love that. And then we got, "She brings a lot of joy whenever she leaves the room." And I think my favourite of all time would have to be, "It's hard to believe he beat out a million other sperm." Someone once asked me if I could draw a picture of how parents are going in Australia in 2010, what would I draw? Well, I'd probably draw this. But what I want you to recognise about this is that, have a look down the bottom there, you'll see the resilient one, the one that made it across despite the sort of vague parenting on offer. And the good news is that most of the young people will actually get through despite the parenting that they're subjected to. But you need to have a bit of knowledge, a bit of skills and a few strategies. Now, there are many different definitions of adolescence. My favourite one of all time is this, which I think is pertinent. But I think we need to recognise that this is a unique developmental stage and it drives parents nuts. Between 10 to 24, we officially have adolescence now. That's according to the Australian Medical Association, and we have to, of course, believe what they say. And I guess one of the most important features is that there are challenges you have to overcome to be a great parent in 2010, because Generation Y is problematic. I guess this is about how to take control. And the first and most important thing is not to make the mistakes of the executive right at the beginning, but to learn to communicate with young people in an adolescent-friendly way. So there are in fact 11 key tips which I have to share with you. The most important one is sometimes shut up. Sometimes saying nothing, let it going through to the wicketkeeper, is by far the wisest course. Of course, if you yell, scream and shout at a young person, they are motivated primarily by a thing in their brain called the amygdala. And it's surrounded by mirror neurons. So the more you scream, yell and shout at a young people, the more they're going to scream, yell and shout at you. So it's a really good idea to keep calm. It's also well known that they have a sensitivity to control, so don't talk too much and listen more. We know that they can only take in a little bit at a time. Boys, in fact, if you have a rule at all talking to boys, is to say something, keep it very short, perhaps 13 seconds, and then count 5 seconds, because it takes that long for them to process it. You try it at home. We know the amygdala loves humour, but don't use sarcasm, don't use put-downs, and it's incredibly important that if you are going to use humour, that you are in fact funny. That helps. We also know that kids need boundaries and you need to set them. We also know that there's no point in issuing kids with ultimatums, because it's essentially an invitation to take you on and you've doubled your trouble. Most importantly, only argue over things that matter. We could light up Melbourne with the number of mums and dads who scream and shout and yell over the fact that their child's rooms aren't tidy. It's very simple. No one's ever died of an untidy room, so don't worry about it. If you're really concerned when they're at school, tidy their room, take a photograph, go down to the chemist, get the picture developed into door size, slap it on the front of the door, and every time you walk past, the room will be tidy. Problem solved.